program, we're going to have a disclaimer, a little bit of an additional element to the disclaimer, as it will be for the next month or so, but we'll explain that in a second. Before we start tonight's program, this is a reminder that this episode will address various topics related to addiction and also codependency. This is also a reminder of mental health and a reminder about multiple sclerosis. These may be sensitive to some of our viewers. Viewer discretion, as always, is advised. We remind you to consult your doctor, your mental health professional, your outreach group, your sponsor, or specialist before adopting any change to your dietary, physical, and or mental health regime. If you're looking for options with respect to mental health, contact SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, at 1-800-662-HELP. It's 1-800-662-4357. The service is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and is a confidential, free information service for individuals and family members facing such stressors. Importantly, if you're feeling suicidal crisis or emotional distress and need to be put in touch with a crisis center, call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. Or go to suicidepreventionlifeline.org. You can also text the word HOME to 741-741. Those resources are also available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And I would be remiss not to talk about this, but I have a little bit more to talk about for the next couple months, so I'll explain that now. In the sense that this idea of multiple sclerosis and demyelination has been paramount in my mind for the last year and change, 2 years almost, but quite frankly, the last 11 years. The National MS Society is a collective of passionate individuals who want to do something about MS now, to move together towards a world free of multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis is comprised of unpredictable and often disabling flare-ups of the central nervous system. Such flare-ups disrupt the flow of information within the brain and between the brain and the body. The National MS Society is the largest private funder of MS researchers in the world, investing more than $1 billion to date. MS stops people from moving, but the National MS Society exists to make sure that MS doesn't. To contact the National MS Society, please call 1-800-344-4867. Again, 1-800-344-4867. Or go to their website at nationalmssociety.org. This is the additional piece of the disclaimer now. Once again, I am raising money for the National MS Society through the MS Walk 2022 in Media, Pennsylvania, and that is being held on April 23rd. You can reach the site raising money for the National MS Society. We have a very light goal of $500 that we're trying to raise for the National MS Society, and every dollar you contribute is not only helping many people, but it's also helping this incredible cause, this incredible organization. You can reach the website at rebrand.ly/a venture to a cure. Once again, rebrand.ly/a venture to a cure. The walk is April 23rd at 10 a.m. and there might be a live stream of it. We will let you know as we get closer to the date of the walk how we're going to do that. Also, if you go to rebrand.ly/a venture to a cure, you can also see a version of this very live stream, because we will be live streaming on the National MS Society's website for the next couple months. So by all means, if you get a chance, please, please, please donate to rebrand.ly/a venture to a cure. A quick shout out to my cousin who surprised me with a wonderful donation. And my cousin Ian is an incredible gentleman, incredible guy, and I am really thankful and really blessed for the donation, but I'm really blessed and really thankful to have him as a cousin. I love you, Ian. Thank you very much. And on that, let me go back to this. Let's begin. In the last year and a half that we've done this show, we've never discussed love, or at least talked about what love is. Tonight that changes. We're going to define love from many different perspectives. We're also More times than not, when we're coming from addiction and compulsion, we start asking questions about how we live our lives now. When we gravitated to the things that we were addicted to, whether it be alcohol or overeating or gambling or whatnot, and now we are living a life that is clean from that, sober from that, we look at questions like, well, how do I start dating? How do I start building relationships again? Tonight, we're going to talk about that. Contrary to popular belief, there's no set rule. There's no set period of time. A lot of it has to do with something we've discussed on the show before, codependency. We'll talk about when that right time is, and we'll talk about codependency, and when to start dating again after being addicted. This is the Venture Forward. Good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon once again. And I am John Venturini, and this is the Venture Forward. I am a recovering addict of overeating, obesity, alcoholism, and compulsive gambling, and it is an honor and pleasure to see all of you tonight on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch, and also at the National MS Society website as well. It has been a very interesting story to tell, in the sense that deep down inside, I realize I am codependent. And I also realize that I have a lot of things I needed to work on and work through in order for me to have any sort of healthy relationship. We're going to talk about the correlation between the two concepts tonight, because what we find is when we're dealing with recovery, more times than not, codependency is an underarching theme. But before we get started, let's see who's in the room on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch, and who wins the door prize. That would go to Jamie, who says, good evening, all. Good evening, Jamie. How are you doing? Hope you're doing well. She also says, nice shirt. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. On YouTube, we also have Nicole. She says hi. I say hi back. Hope you're doing well. We also have Rich on YouTube who says, hey, JV. Hey, Rich. Hope you're having a great evening. Or it's still evening? Great morning over there. I think you just, London, right? We also have Brad on YouTube who says, hey, all. Hey, Brad. Hope you're doing well. And Rich has informed me that, yes, technically morning, it is 1:10 over by him. So let's talk about finding love whilst tackling addiction, and also the idea of codependency and how much it is a hamper in all of that. It's something that is not easy to talk about because it's something where I realize that I have just as much an equal stake in that game as much as my ex-wife did. And I don't really like to go down the road and talk about that, but I will talk about it at a high level just for the sense that codependency was definitely an issue and definitely a warning sign to a lot of the things that plagued me. So when looking at the grand scheme of things, again, as we've always said, I was the one putting the food in my mouth. I was the one drinking. I was the one hitting the buttons on the video poker machine. But that was also because I had a lot of things going on up here that needed to be worked on. So what is that exactly? Before we begin, I'm going to show you a slide I showed you a couple weeks ago. Some thoughts. Should look familiar because this is exactly what I talk to. Some people don't use the word love much. They have very varying degrees of love for another person in many kinds of relationships. Tonight's conversation was born out of this journey of 2+ years, now 3 years, as you saw in the opening countdown. It's an ongoing exploration and discussion of what love truly is for me. And we will cite sources including Very Well Mind, Mind Body Green, and a few others that will be on the slides. However, as we say in the open, your therapist or support group may be another bona fide resource for perspective. So what are we covering tonight? We're talking about my story, which I kind of hinted at already. We'll talk about common advice and common myth when it comes to finding love outside of addiction or through addiction. We'll talk about codependency's role in that formula. We'll talk about the recovery patterns of codependency, one of the most important hallmarks of Codependency Anonymous, and then we'll talk about this day's version of the language of letting go. Gilly joining us, who says, I found a love for venturing forward. Gilly, glad you're here tonight for sure. So my story. We've talked about this on the show before, but it's worth just listing it over here for a second. Gained and lost 200 pounds 3 times. Problems with alcohol. Problems with gambling. Problems with codependency. Problems with self-confidence. When those 4 factors really start ruminating and start kicking us down, it would be needless to say that I had a major problem with self-confidence. But in that was also a major problem with codependency. So you think about why relationships come and go. You think about what our sort of take on it, what we offer, what we give in these relationships. We have to present the best version of ourselves because at bare minimum, we have to love and respect ourselves. We have to have a strong sense of love, a strong sense of honesty, a strong sense of guidance, a strong sense of wisdom within ourselves, so we can then share that with anyone and everyone. If we don't have that, we run the risk of failure. We run the risk of having relationships that may be on very unstable ground. So to take a look at oneself, to do that self-reflection, is very much an important thing, not only for those that are trying to find love or a relationship of any kind out of addiction. And this is true for anybody. So it's something that we really have to be very cognizant of, very reflective of, and very aware of. So two sites helped out with this one, and the topic is very simple. Should I date while in recovery? And my thanks to Beachside Rehab and also the Recovery Village for this. But they say that most experts say that a person in early recovery should wait at least a year before dating, starting a relationship, or making important decisions. That dating should only occur when a person understands the importance and follow through while remaining their sobriety as their top priority. We could change the word sobriety with whatever addiction we're talking about, right? Whether it is overeating, whether it is sobriety, whether it is compulsive gambling, what have you. Recovery takes work, and you will need to devote most of your time and energy to staying sober, staying clean, staying free of throwing countless amounts of money away. Let's go to Maine for a second. I am very careful about the first bullet on that slide, in the sense that a year is a period of time that does not talk about exactly what we're going through. It does not talk to the things that are in our life, the things that may be confounders to that recovery. And everybody's had dealt with confounders in the last 2 years. That would be the pandemic or the Backstreet Boys reunion tour, whatever you want to call it, right? So there are plenty of confounders, plenty of things that could stand in the way of that. But that's even more the reason why we have to be very aware of ourselves. And we have to love ourselves. We have to give ourselves respect. When we look at the past, we must learn but not dwell. We must stay in the present and we must move forward. So that goes without saying. A couple comments. Jamie says, anything that comes before your sobriety yourself will win. If you get what I'm trying to say. Yeah, without question, I understand what you're trying to say for sure. I think the thing is, the only person that's going to honestly realize that is an honest version of ourselves. And that requires, I don't know, honesty, transparency. You're going to see that theme a couple more times in tonight's presentation. But honesty and transparency is very much important, is very much table offerings for this. Wrong. Also, it also helps if my keyboard and everything can work correctly and not click around and whatnot. Some risks and tips. Beachsiderehab.com, thank you for the following. There are 3 risks: losing yourself, codependence, and relapse. I think the thing that we fear the most, obviously, is relapse. We can lose ourselves really quickly, and we must not lose our sense of self. That in itself can lead to codependence. And that codependence, when it becomes too much of an issue, can definitely lead to the relapse of the addiction or the compulsion that we've had. So we have to be aware of these things. The tips would be being honest and transparent, setting boundaries, taking it slow. But I list the 4th one for a reason. Again, set boundaries. The reason why I listed that twice is because when you're dealing with codependency, you don't know how to do that real well, do you? You have a very poor form of boundaries. You have a very poor form of trying to make sure that you are protected, but everybody else you deal with is protected. And there's no intermingling, no crossing over. Everybody has the place where they can breathe and be themselves and be the best version of themselves. A question popped up in the chat. Jamie asks, how do you find losing yourself? Well, When you start becoming someone who is a fragment of what they used to be, if you end up becoming someone who is absolutely someone who cannot be sustainable, losing yourself would be someone who is I would say a nefarious or malevolent shadow of themselves. Granted, we do lose ourselves every now and then, but I like to look at it as being agile, being on a part of a process where we're changing. And as we learn and we grow, we do change. But we can't lose ourselves. We can't lose what we like, what we gravitate to, what we find to be of interest. That is important. Now there is a caveat to that. Obviously, as long as it's healthy, right? Our health is most important here, but we can't lose who we are. Eventually, if we are forced to change that, it'll come back in droves and it might not be the most healthy sort of thing at all. So that's what is meant by losing yourself. When we look at this from something out of medium.com, the 5 tips to maintain a healthy relationship when recovering from codependency, the 5 hallmarks are basically the same. Self-reflection is key. And how do you self-reflect? It's meditation, it's journaling, it's therapy, it's all of that. The second piece would be honesty and transparency. The more that we put things behind lies, whether they are pathologically given or small or any kind of lie, I think the worse the problem is. We're actually pouring gasoline on a fire, aren't we? Communication is key. If something bothers you, if something sounds like something that you need to talk about, you should talk about it. Communication is very much important. Grace. We can't be hard on each other. We can't. We can't have short triggers. We have to have an air of making sure that we give people a chance of being human beings. We're far from perfect. As long as, we're far from perfect, but we do progress. We do believe in progress, not perfection, rather. And then rewarding kind of work. When you're doing projects with someone and projects are plentiful and good projects, that's definitely something that's a hallmark, whatever that project may be. But nevertheless, we have to avoid the codependent's way of speech, because there is a common calling card that we speak when we are in the heights of codependency. And in Codependence Anonymous, CODA, there is something called the recovery patterns of codependency. And we're going to discuss that in a minute or two. But I wanted to talk about this for a second. I realized I had a lot of these issues for a few reasons. Some of this I've talked about on the show before. But I think the way we behave, the way we work through things, come from a multitude of different sources. But it's also what we are taught and what we learn over the years, whether it is from family or the friends we keep or the environments we are in. And we have to be at least cognizant enough to know that there are multiple perspectives on life. There are multiple ways of looking at things. The reason why I made a point of saying this right now is, and this is a little bit of a sneak peek, but next Thursday night, we're going to talk about the 2 people that came into this life that taught me that we needed to rethink the way we look at things, that taught me about the importance of internal family systems and other things. I would say these were the people that got me on the train tracks down a place where I'm in a much better place. But again, we have to not necessarily subscribe to the things we grew up with. We must not necessarily subscribe to not necessarily theology, but philosophies that may be a bit dated, that may not be tested. We have to keep on learning for ourselves. Gilly had a couple comments. I'll bring them up real quick. Gilly says, if one gazes into the abyss long enough, the abyss will gaze back into you. And further says, He who makes a beast of himself relives the burden of being a man. That's being a human being. A human being is a creature that is far from perfect, but is a creature, when tuned correctly, can learn and be just an incredible member of this universe. Thank you for saying what you said, Gilly. The recovery patterns of codependency is a list of patterns discussed in Codependence Anonymous. You talk about one way of thinking and how it should be changed to another way of thinking. We may say one thing when we're deep in these sort of insecurities, when we should really think about things in a different sort of way. The patterns talk to denial, talk to low self-esteem, talk to compliance, talk to control. So let's talk about denial. The codependent will have one way of saying things versus when we're in recovery, we should be thinking about this in a different way. For example, a codependent may say, I have difficulty identifying what I am feeling. Whereas when we're in recovery, we say, I am aware of my feelings and identify them, often in the moment. When we're codependent, we say, I minimize, alter, or deny how I truly feel. In recovery, we say, I embrace my feelings as being valid and important. I am truthful with myself. The codependent would say, I perceive myself as being completely unselfish, and I keep the focus on my own well-being. Whereas in recovery, you know how to say, I know the difference dedicated to the well-being of others between caring and caretaking. When you think about it that way, we're not only looking at it from our perspective, we're looking at that from a universal perspective, a perspective that ends up helping everybody, including ourselves, in the end run. A couple comments popped up as I was saying that. Jamie says, as in fighting with the monster, you give the monster the power. And she also says, listen to your monster. If the monster's not nefarious, absolutely listen to your monster. If the monster is nefarious and is out to hurt anyone, including yourself, you don't listen to that monster. Understanding the difference is the most important thing. Let's talk about low self-esteem. 6 things that pop up. A codependent would say, I have difficulty making decisions. Someone in recovery would say, I trust my ability to make effective decisions. You see the difference there? It's not being in a standstill or paralyzed by the thought of making a decision. You know that the decision you make is going to be an effective one. And if it's the wrong decision, well, you know that you can work through that. Not every decision is a make or break. Again, this is a long life we live if everything works to the best of our ability. The codependent says, I judge everything I think, say, or do harshly as never good enough. Whereas in recovery, we say, I accept myself as I am. And I emphasize progress over perfection. The one thing I'll add to that is progress, patience over perfection. Patience is important. Must never lose sight of that. The codependent may say, I judge everything I think, say, or do harshly as never good enough. It's twice. Sorry. My apologies. We'll go to the next one. I do not ask others to meet my needs or desires, as a codependent would say. A recovery person would say, I meet my own needs and wants when possible. I reach out for help when it's necessary and appropriate. The codependent would say, I value others' approval of my thinking, feelings, and behaviors over my own. The recovery mind would say, I have confidence in myself. I no longer seek others' approval of my thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. In other words, I have every stake in that game. And more times than not, it's going to be the sort of final arbiter in that. The only time it's not the final arbiter is when we need to learn something. But then again, if we're true to ourselves, we go ahead and learn it. The codependent mind says, I do not perceive myself as a lovable or worthwhile person. The recovery person says, I recognize myself as being a lovable and valuable person. Couple thoughts. Matt Haas, the co-host of VF Talk, says, are we talking about monsters? Yeah, we are talking about monsters, and it's good to see you this evening for sure. Jamie says, love that. Progress, patience. Yeah, progress and patience come hand in hand. We have to be patient with ourselves. If we're not, then we're putting ourselves a very, maybe I would say erroneous time frame on things, because sometimes we want to get things done now when we should be looking at the proper time for things to be done. As they say, haste makes waste. Big believer in that. But we have to be patient. We absolutely have to be patient and move towards progress and not worry about perfection. Let's talk about compliance. 6 things here. The codependent mind says, I compromise my own values and integrity to avoid rejection of others' anger. Whereas the person in recovery would say, I am rooted in my own values even if others don't agree or become angry. The codependent mind says, I am very sensitive to how others are feeling and feel the same. The recovery mind says, I can separate my feelings from the feelings of others. The codependent mind says, I am extremely loyal, remaining in harmful situations too long. The recovery mind says, I am committed to my safety and recovery work. I leave situations that feel unsafe or are inconsistent with my goals. Let me repeat that. I am committed to my safety and recovery work. I leave situations that feel unsafe or are inconsistent with my goals. The codependent mind would say, I value others' opinions and feelings more than my own, and I'm afraid to express differing opinions and feelings of my own. Whereas the recovery mind would say, I respect my own opinions and feelings and express them appropriately. The codependent mind says, I put aside my own interests and hobbies in order to do what others want. The recovery mind says, I consider my own interests first when asked to participate in another's plans. And finally, the codependent mind says, I accept sex when I want love. The recovery mind says, my sexuality is grounded in genuine intimacy and connection. I know the difference between lust and love. And then finally, let's talk about control patterns. 7 items here. The codependent mind says, I believe most other people are incapable of taking care of themselves. The recovery mind says, I realize that, with rare exceptions, other adults are capable of managing their own lives. My job is to let them. The codependent mind says, I attempt to convince others of what they should think and how they truly feel. Where the recovery mind says, I accept and value the differing thoughts, feelings, and opinions of others. The codependent mind says, I become resentful when others will not let me help them. The recovery mind says, I feel comfortable when I see others take care of themselves. The codependent mind says, I freely offer others advice and directions without being asked. Whereas the recovery mind says, I am a compassionate and empathic listener, giving advice only if directly asked. The codependent mind says, I lavish gifts and favors on those I care about. The recovery mind says, I carefully and honestly contemplate my motivation when preparing to give a gift. The codependent mind says, I use sex to gain approval and acceptance. The recovery mind says, I feel love and accepted for myself, just the way I am. And lastly, the codependent mind says, I have to be needed in order to have a relationship with others. Whereas the recovery mind says, I develop relationships with others based on equality, intimacy, and balance. Some comments. Matt asks, can I ask a question? Is there a word for the opposite of codependent? I think that would be independent. in the sense that if we're independent, we're not worried about others' ways of thinking. We work together in that sort of world. Brad goes on to say that counterdependency is the opposite. Matt Wood asks this question: is there a significance in the recovery column consisting of sans serif font? I think, of course, you're just kidding, but I will answer that question because I find it funny. I don't. I think about that sort of mindset, being stuck in that sort of codependent mindset, as typing. So the font that was on the left, and I'll show exactly what I'm talking about. The font that's on the left is a typewriter font, whereas the right hand font is a serif font. It's a font of humanism. It's a font of what's going on up here. So that's why that was the artistic choice in why I separated the two. Love that question. He goes on to say, I like typefaces. Yeah, typefaces are awesome. You talk about kerning and spacing and all that stuff. It's fantastic. Marilyn's joining us, who says, afternoon, everyone, and waves and provides 3 purple hearts. I wave back at you with 3 blue hearts. And Matt totally picked up on my typeface choice there. So I find it a difficult topic to talk to because I know a couple things float in my mind. I kind of hinted at this before, but we were made to learn things one way when we were kids, when we were growing up. Whether it was by the examples of our family or our friends, or just things that were grown towards us. And it takes a very long time to break from those things, especially when those habits end up becoming malevolent, when they end up being things that end up harming us in the end run. To reverse that takes a long period of time. The one thing I will be very adamant about tonight is, as much as codependency was a problem for me, I know that in various relationships in my life, codependency was definitely resonant on the other side of the glass as well. And whether or not that codependency seeped in and it became a co-addictive, codependent sort of thing, maybe, very much maybe. We could talk about the alcoholism, we could talk about the overeating, all that. But at the end of the day, it's up to us. It's up to us to live the best life we can, to think about things in the most healthy way possible. Sarah joining us on YouTube. How are you doing this evening? She says, they can be survival tactics as a kid. Yes, absolutely. When fight or flight becomes something where we're very much adamant, what do we need to do to survive, whether in the classroom or in the schoolyard or whatnot? Yeah, they become survival tactics. And it takes a long time to work away from that. It's also very hard to see what exactly is malevolent versus what is benevolent, what can actually guide us forward, versus what can push us back. So it's definitely something that we must it's something that we must be aware of at all times. Easy joining us tonight. How are you? He says, good afternoon, coming in for 5 or so minutes and off of work. One of his clients has COVID. I'm sorry about that, Easy. Glad you're here. Glad you're doing well. Thoughts for your client, of course. May they get better real quickly. Let's see. So I guess the last thing I wanted to talk about is today's language of letting go. And then we're going to talk about a couple of things that were not in the slides, not in the agenda, but I wanted to share them with you for sure. Language of letting go for today, February 17th, has to do with acceptance. And it goes something like this. Our basic recovery concept that never loses its power to work miracles is the concept called acceptance. We do not achieve acceptance in a moment. We often must work through a mirage of feelings, sometimes anger, outrage, shame, self pity, or sadness. But if acceptance is our goal, we will achieve it. What is more freeing than to laugh at our weaknesses and to be grateful for our strengths? To know the entire package known as us, with all of our feelings, thoughts, tendencies, and history, is worthy of acceptance and brings healing feelings. To accept our circumstances is another miraculous cure. For anything to change, or anyone to change, we must first accept others, the circumstance, and ourselves exactly as they are. Then we need to take it one step further. We need to become grateful for our circumstances or ourselves. We add a touch of faith by saying, I know this is exactly the way it's supposed to be for the moment. No matter how complicated we get, the basics never lose their power to restore us to sanity. Today, God, help me practice the concept of acceptance in my life. Help me accept others, my circumstances, and myself. Take me one step further and help me feel grateful. And that's today's language of letting go. So, what is going on? You know, I'm doing an MS walk in the end of April. One thing I hinted to early, about 4 weeks ago, maybe a little bit longer than that, is how I wanted to run more races this year, how I wanted to actually be active and run. And I can tell you now that on March 27th, I will be running my first half marathon in Cary, North Carolina. I've gone from a world where I went to barely moving 5 to 10 feet, or as I told someone yesterday, I could barely walk 13.1 feet, and now I'm going to be running 13.1 miles. To see this in true sort of reality has been incredible. I think the other thing that is resonant in my mind, and the other thing I am very thankful and fortunate for, is the fact that I have been on this diet for 3 years. As you saw in the open, there was the celebration of Lose It for the 3 years of the diet. And without that tracking, I don't know where I would be right now. Given the fact that I've gained and lost this weight 3 times over, it is very important for me to continue tracking well past the goal line, which I'm well past the goal line now. It's now about creating muscle mass and having that healthy percentage of body fat to weight. But continuing to track is the most important thing I can do. So I will be moving around a lot on feet, whether it's running 13.1 miles or walking a 3-mile walk for the National MS Society. And that's what they call a segue. Because it gives me a chance to bring back this graphic real quick. The MS Walk Media 2022 is going to be on Saturday, April 23rd at 10 o'clock Eastern Time. Let me bring up the graphic again as far as how you can help out. I have a site that was created, as I did last year, for fundraising for National MS Society and this walk. It's at rebrand.ly/adventure to a cure. Once again, rebrand.ly/adventure to a cure. Every donation that you put in not only is a wonderful addition to the fundraising effort from my team, Adventure to a Cure, but is helping a very important organization, a very important society in hopefully a cure to this really unpredictable disease, and that of multiple sclerosis and demyelination. As I've said many times before in the open, there's over 1 million people in this country who have multiple sclerosis. And I hope that there comes a time where we can get past that, that we have a cure for it. We have remyelinating agents, that myelin sheath becomes stronger than ever before, and that we actually can work to the best of our ability, mentally, physically, what have you. I am fortunate that I haven't had problems physically. Outside outside of a slight sort of differential in gait, the only issues that I've had has basically been neurological, in the sense of bad handwriting, but also optic neuritis from time to time. In fact, the optic neuritis and desensitization, numbing, top of the left side of my head and down the right hand side of my body, was very much the reason that got me into my PCP, but then eventually over to Chester County Hospital on New Year's Eve 2020, that I eventually got a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis because there were bright lesions in my MRI. So I am very thankful for the National MS Society, but I'm also very thankful for the University of Pennsylvania and Lancaster General Medicine, because they helped me considerably in battling this disease. So again, if you have any questions, you want to learn more about the National MS Society, call them 1-800-344-4867. Once again, 1-800-344-4867. Go to their website, nationalmssociety.org. And if you'd like, we really would appreciate it greatly if you can go to rebrand.ly/adventure to a cure and make a donation or become part of my team. I would really, really appreciate that. I'm going to go back to Maine and talk about the last few comments. When I started talking about the marathon, I got double exclamation points from Sarah. Thank you. Matt with a running emoji. Thank you. Laura here on Facebook says, going to have to catch the replay. Thank you for joining us. Easy says, awesome, JV. Don't overassert yourself, mate. I'm trying not to. I have a strategy as far as running it. It may be a run, jog, walk. And as I've told some of you already, my goal is just to finish the darn thing because it's my first half marathon. Sarah says, woohoo. Jamie says, JV, you're on fire. Yeah, after even doing a 6-mile run, I feel like my legs are on fire for sure. And a couple more comments. Brad says, hey, I'll still be listening, but I'm driving and not in the chat anymore. Love you. So we love you, Brad. Thank you for joining us tonight. Jamie with 5 orange hearts. Thank you, Jamie. Love you. Big time. And then let's see. Matt says, become part of your team. What do you mean by that? There is a button on the page that says join the team for Adventure to a Cure. Let me see if I can bring it up over here and I'll show you. Please stand by. There we go. I'll go back to... So if you go down here, there's the button that says join our team. And you can join the team by clicking on that button. So there you go. What I forgot is that on that page is also a live stream of this very episode. So I forgot about that, and that's why I was sounding in duplicate for a second. But yeah, join our team. That's the button you would click to become a part of the team to raise funds for the National MS Society and this walk. Brad says, JV, what is your Cash App? The Cash App for the Venture Forward is through Buy Me a Coffee. That's buymeacoffee/Venture Forward. I would love donations to that too. So thank you for that. And if you go to Venture to a Cure rebrand.ly/adventure. I might as well bring that back up for a second. If you go to rebrand.ly/adventure to a cure, there's ways to donate through there too. So a double ask there. Anything you do through Buy Me a Coffee helps support the show, and I'm very much appreciative of that. If you go to rebrand.ly/adventure to a cure, you're adding your donation to the National MS Society. So Very cool. I'll get that graphic a couple more times. Uh, Rich says, JV, you're my man. Rich, you're awesome. Love you, man. And Gilly says he ran 3.7 today on melting ice straight trail with Yak Track running spikes. 7 minutes 27-second mile on the ice. 51 out. Oh man, first no shirt day. 51 degrees out. First no shirt day of the year. That must have been a great feeling. So, congratulations on that. Yeah, Brad, I'll definitely Facebook you the link for sure. And Matt says, so is joining the team a fundraising effort, or will those who join actually will be in a race? No. If you join the team, you're not necessarily walking in the race. There's I think there's a differential for that. But I think if you donate enough money, or raise enough money, you can be part of that race in media as well. So we could talk about that offline, but that's where you would do it. It says join my team on that page, which again is, bringing up the graphic, rebrand.ly/adventure to a cure. Once again, rebrand.ly/adventure to a cure. But on that, we're going to talk about what's going on tomorrow. We have VF Talks at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific, where we have a conversation about anything and everything with Matt Haas, Paul Burke, and all of you. And then next week, we will actually talk about the weight loss on Tuesday. We'll talk about the 3-year chip for this diet and the incredible changes that have taken place in my life over the last 36 months. We'll talk about that. And then 1 week from tonight, we'll talk about the 2 people that basically changed my life. And I will always be indebted to them, for sure. But until next time, as I try to find my... Everything went away. There we go. It's been a while since I used this, right? Until next time, I'm going to say the same thing I say at the end of every Venture Forward and VF Talks. Stay safe, stay sane, stay strong, stay sober. You're worth it. Have a wonderful night. We'll see you tomorrow night for VF Talks at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific, right here on this channel. Have a wonderful night. I love you. Fly be free.